The 10-member panel recommends sweeping changes to the Companies Act, proposes to decontrol directors' remuneration and align related party transaction and insider trading rules with SEBI. Green shoots for the economy. Core sector output picks up pace in December. The manufacturing PMI hits a 4-month high in January. It's a muddled start to the new year for Motown. Maruti disappoints as maintenance shutdown takes total sales to a 9-month low. M&M's car sales perk up, but tractor sales still in single digit. Tata Motors commercial vehicle sales perk up, but passenger cars remain sluggish. Factory activity in China drops to its lowest level in 3 years. Stocks in Europe and Wall Street feel the heat. Crude prices see some sharp cuts. Bears wipe out early morning gains as markets start February on a volatile note. The bank stocks take it on the chin, but mid-caps outperform. Expect the RBI to maintain status quo in its monetary policy tomorrow. A CNBC TV 18 poll shows 100% of market participants expect no change in key policy rates.
किस तरह से पूरा एक जाल बिछा करके या तो जो भी कोई कंपनी पनपती है उसको खरीद लेते हैं या उसको खत्म करते हैं. अब पतंजलि के साथ ये दोनों नहीं.
All out war in the FMCG space. Patanjali's Baba Ramdev lashes out at Hindustan Unilever and Colgate, says foreign companies are here to loot Indian customers.
The TPP will certainly have an impact on India's exports.
After brushing it aside earlier, Commerce Minister takes a U-turn on the Trans-Pacific Partnership between 12 countries, admits India's exports will be adversely impacted. The telecom regulator is all set to put an end to differential pricing of data and bat for net neutrality. Sources say the TRAI will explore alternate methods. Bajaj launches its new 150cc motorcycle named the Bee. The bike is made from scrap metal of the INS Vikrant and will be priced between 60 and 70,000 rupees. Well, it will be a watershed moment for India in marriage equality. The Supreme Court will take up a curative petition against Section 377 tomorrow. This draconian section criminalizes homosexuality and has been in our statute books for over 100 years. Will India make a progressive statement or err on the wrong side of history? The answer to that could be less than 24 hours away. Good evening. Thanks very much for joining us on India Business Hour. Hi, Nandar. Hi, Shireen. It's going to be an open court when that case is taken up tomorrow, perhaps the last resort for the country. Absolutely, and we will be tracking that action right here on CNBC TV 18. In fact, in a short while from now, we'll get you a preview to that judgment that is coming up. But first, as always on India Business Hour, on to the market action. Now, what started off as a promising day ended with marginal losses as bears took charge in day trade. So the Sensex ended lower by about 40 points in what was an extremely volatile day of trade. The Nifty also ended in the red. Volumes were on the higher side thanks to volatility. Bank stocks again taking it on the chin, the main culprits for dragging the markets down. The Bank Nifty losing 200 points. But on the flip side, the mid-caps outperformed the blue chips, with the mid-cap index going home with gains of over 50 points. So that was the story on the Lal Street. But a quick check of crude markets now. Prices there back under pressure. This after posting its second weekly gains on Friday. Now, we've seen pressure mount on crude prices because of disappointing data that's come in from China. Another major reason for the sell-off is the dwindling possibility of all the large oil producers coming together to cut production. Remember, that was the big hope last week on the back of commentary that came in from Russia's energy minister on the possibility of a production cut. But that hope is fast dwindling. But Nantara, what was the action across Asia today?
Turned to be a mixed bag, Shireen. China's factory sector contracted for the 6th straight month and hit a 3-year low in the process. The country's January PMI has come in at 49.4. The Shanghai Composite, that closed 1.7% in the red. In Japan, manufacturing activity slowed slightly to 52.3, but remained solid as new exports orders actually accelerated, buoyed by this and the recently announced negative interest rates. You saw Japan's Nikkei actually end up 2% in the green, almost 350 points up. Other major indices like the South Korean Kospi and the Australian ASX also extended their gains today. So that's Asia, and taking a cue from the development in China and the rest of Asia, we did see European stocks actually trade lower in trade today. They did give up the early morning gains. A slide in oil prices also didn't help matters. So you had both the NYMEX and the Brent, like you were pointing out, Shireen, earlier, down by about 3%. The US market that opened just a short while back has also taken a hit. The indices from the Wall Street will come up for you next on your screen. And that, there you go. Look at the Dow. That's down almost 110 points in trade.
All right, so it's a weak session there as far as the US and the European markets are concerned. But back home to the big macro story. Seem to be some green shoots for the economy, or maybe we shouldn't make too much of it. The core sector growth in December has picked up pace. India's manufacturing PMI for the month of January has come in at a 4-month high. Lata standing by with the details. Lata, December core sector growth up by 0.9%. So how should we read this?
Well, a 0.9% rise in the core sector is not exactly good news. The only thing that is less disheartening about that number is that it is for the month of December, when one city and a large part of South India was badly affected. So perhaps seasonally adjusted January won't look so bad. The positive in that was coal, cement and fertilizer did very well. Fertilizer did exceptionally well with a 13% growth, and this is the 5th straight month that fertilizer output is up in double digits, between 13 and 16%. That's the best number. But cement also very encouraging, considering November saw a contraction. It does look like construction activity has picked up. But the good news ends there. Very bad news coming in on electricity. Continues to be at single digit. It used to run in double digits 1 year ago throughout calendar 2014. Steel, again, a contraction. Crude oil, a contraction. Coal is up 6.1%, but it used to do much better, even at 7% in earlier months. But okay, I would still take coal as good news. The market would see the PMI as the positive, because that is an even more recent number, January PMI coming in at a 4-month high. Now there it does look like consumption is the engine. That is the good news. And likewise, export inflows appear to have strengthened. Even employment headcounts are not very bad from the PMI data in January. But most economists don't take the PMI seriously, because it's all of 500 manufacturing units which are surveyed, hardly representative. So it's core sector that will be watched more closely. Net, a little good news in January for sure, but not enough to fire the market's imagination.
All right, Lata, thanks very much for making sense of the macro data for us. But the big question now is, what is the Reserve Bank going to do? It is all set to announce the 6th bi-monthly policy on Tuesday, and the market seemed to have factored in a pause. The speech will be more important for the RBI's views on current liquidity tightness. The governor hints on what kind of a deficit he will stomach and cues for growth and inflation in the coming year. Now, CNBC TV 18's Ritu Singh has polled treasury heads and economists from across India's top banks and reports the markets will look for the RBI's cues on all of those issues, but of course is expecting a status quo policy for tomorrow.
Governor Rajan may pass tomorrow's monetary policy day without any action, said all the top economists and treasury heads polled by CNBC TV 18. He is most likely to say he will wait for the fiscal deficit numbers before he brings down rates. After all, just on Friday he spoke strongly on this issue.
Ordinarily, one would think that a government should borrow less, that is, run lower fiscal deficits in order to reduce its debt. But there is indeed a theoretical possibility that the growth generated by a fiscal expansion is so great, so large, so fantastic as to outweigh the additional debt that is taken on. Unfortunately, this depends on growth multipliers on government spending, which at this juncture, by most estimates, are likely to be relatively small, So more spending will probably hurt debt dynamics.
According to CNBC TV 18's poll, the key repo and cash reserve ratio rates will remain unchanged in this policy. However, an overwhelming 90% of the respondents said RBI will remain in an accommodative stance. While 60% expect only one 25 basis point rate cut in the entire calendar 2016, the remaining are divided between a 50 and 75 basis cut through the year. 60% expect the tone of the statement to be similar to the December policy, but 30% expect a slightly more dovish tone. On the macro indicators, the majority believes the GDP forecast for FY16 will be maintained at 7.4%. But it is Governor Rajan's comments on inflation that will be most closely watched. Half the respondents expect the retail inflation target for January 2017 to be maintained at 4.8%, but the other half expects it to be raised to 4.9 to 5.4% in this policy. The bigger problem the market faces is the tightening liquidity in the system. Is RBI sympathetic on liquidity and will it buy bonds? Is what the markets want to know. More importantly, what is the longer-term view on liquidity next year? 70% of our respondents said that would be more important than his remarks on rates. In Mumbai, Ritu Singh.
So that's a unanimous verdict a day ahead of the monetary policy. Now, it is going to be status quo. Here's the other big story this evening. The 10-member panel set up to propose changes to the Companies Act and improve ease of doing business has submitted its report. That panel is proposing to tweak about 78 sections of the Companies Act that will effectively need 100 new rules for India Inc. Melika Doshi spoke with Bharat Vasani, the General Counsel for Tata Group, and one of the members of this panel on all of these recommendations. Here's an excerpt of that conversation.
The most fundamental change which is recommended is that henceforth for directors' remuneration, I mean managerial remuneration, no file will go to Shastri Bhavan. Everything is decontrolled. It's all left to the companies to decide. Corporate democracy is restored. The company's shareholders can decide how much they want to pay to their directors. That's one of the most profound change. A very important change which is made is this definition of holding a subsidiary company, which was creating a lot of confusion, because for the first time in 2013 Act, we had introduced this concept of preference share capital also to be counted in deciding whether a company is a subsidiary or not. Now we are back to the 1956 Act position that it will be only equity capital which will be considered in deciding whether a company is a subsidiary or not. And similarly, there's a change in the definition of associate company. The other major change is, these sections 194 and 195, which dealt with forward dealing and insider trading, have been deleted from the company. It's recommended to be deleted from the Companies Act because they don't have the private company and unlisted companies. So the SEBI will regulate the listed company. The layering restrictions which are there under the Companies Act for subsidiaries and for investment companies have been eliminated. Companies would have total flexibility to restructure the way it likes. The 1956 Act has been restored. There are also very significant changes when it comes to the auditor's report. There are also changes with regard to the way you do the board meeting through video conferencing. Everything is significantly simplified. What has not changed is the rotation of auditors. The period is also the same 3 years. But apart from that, a lot of changes have been made. In fact, one of the key changes I would say as far as the Nominations and Remuneration Committee is concerned, the 2013 Act said the entire board evaluation shall be carried out by the NRC. Now it's proposed that the NRC will only recommend a methodology and the board will decide how to carry out the performance evaluation of directors. And there are quite a few other changes with regard to issue of capital. The private placement rules have been significantly streamlined to facilitate companies to do private placement much more easily.
Mr. Vasani, you've outlined several changes as the committee's report also suggests will need amendments to the Act. That is a legislative process, right, sir? Or are many of these changes possible also through the rules of the Act itself?
There are 50 rules to be changed, but we were very careful. We only recommended those changes in the Act which were absolutely necessary because they were all hardwired and we could not have made those changes without amending the Act.
Have you all suggested any changes to the related party transactions sections, sir? The ones that have brought in considerable transparency and given shareholders an opportunity to vote in or vote out certain related party transactions?
No change except one very major change which would impact the companies is that the circular which was issued by the Minister of Corporate Affairs that the all related parties can vote except the concerned related parties which is relevant for the transaction. We have gone back to the original position that now all related parties cannot vote on related party transactions. So we are par with SEBI now. The MCA provisions and the SEBI provisions are at par, and the circular issued earlier will be withdrawn.
So that's interesting, sir. But besides this change, which seems to be a change very evidently in favor of corporate governance, would you say that some of the changes recommended by your committee might go towards the ease of doing business, but might end up diluting some of the governance recommendations made in Companies Act 2013? For instance, you mentioned sections 185, 186, which have to do with intercorporate loans and guarantees. Do you believe that maybe some of these recommendations might change the balance of power?
Not really. Quite frankly, we have been extremely careful to ensure that we don't dilute the governance requirements, at the same time facilitate the ease of doing business, which was the mantra or the cardinal principle when we were reviewing these changes. And most of the changes which have been recommended, if you go through, there are more, in fact, according to me, there are more than 100 changes, are all directed towards facilitating the business. And particularly, there are several incentives offered to startups and the small companies and private companies. So a lot of regulatory burden from startups and private companies is going to be relaxed once this amendment, I believe the proposal is to include this amendment bill in the budget session of the Parliament, and if these changes are passed by Parliament, it will be a very significant reduction in burden for private companies and startups.
Well, that's Bharat Vasani of the Tata Group and also a member of the committee that was set up to recommend changes to the Companies Act of 2013. They're telling Menika that over 100 changes have been proposed, all with the aim of the ease of doing business. Now, we will keep tracking that story here on CNBC TV 18. But it hasn't been a promising start to the new year for India's auto companies. The January auto sales data has thrown up a mixed bag. There are some signs which offer hope. Sonia joins us now with the details. Sonia, it's a patchy sort of performance there for the sector.
Oh yes, it was a mixed bag that we saw for the auto sector in the month of January. The biggest disappointment came in from Maruti. The January sales for Maruti hit a 9-month low. That's the overall sales, which fell about 2.6% year on year. But the biggest disappointment was in the export sales, which has fallen to the 15-month low. So this is the lowest level of exports we've seen since October 2014, down about 34%. The management does say that it is because of lower number of working days that the sales have been lower. However, we do notice that there has been a reduction in demand for some of the new products like the Ciaz and Celerio. They have failed to sustain after the initial good response post the launch. In the other numbers, Eicher Motors reported a good set of numbers. So Royal Enfield sales went up 65% year on year. Commercial vehicle sales were also good. Ashok Leyland had a healthy month. So total sales for Ashok Leyland up 30%. The medium and heavy commercial vehicle sales were up 40%. And there has been some pre-buying ahead of the emission norm changes. So that was factored in. Even for M&M, there's been a decent growth in the auto segment this time. The auto sector sales were up 10%, led by passenger vehicle sales. And the new launches like the KUV 100 and the TUV 300 saw a good response this time. Tractor segment, however, continues to remain slightly under pressure. So tractor sales were up just about 1%. But the biggest takeaway really was the disappointment that we saw in Maruti sales this month.
So that's the patchy performance by some of the automakers in the month of January. Thanks a lot, Sonia, for joining us with that. Also, Tata Motors came out with its sales figures. Sales growth of 10%. This was primarily led by a healthy growth across commercial vehicles. Passenger car sales dropped 18%. TVS Motors seems to have recovered from the Chennai floods. Total sales and two-wheeler sales rose over 12%. Exports grew by over 39%.
Staying with auto, Bajaj Auto today unveiled its latest motorcycle offering, the 150cc V, with an eye on attacking Hero Motors' bread and butter market. This launch is the first new brand offering by Bajaj in over a decade, and the company hopes it will disrupt the commuter market currently dominated by 100cc bikes. CNBC TV 18's Ronojoy Banerjee finds out if Bajaj Auto's move marks a decisive shift in its twin brand motorcycle strategy or not.
Bajaj Auto is all set to hit the road with a new brand, the V15. Positioned as the invincible commuter, this 150cc bike is inspired by and partly made from the metal of India's first naval warhorse, the INS Vikrant. With V, Bajaj hopes to create a new premium segment in the voluminous and highly competitive commuter bike market in India. The 150cc bike that will be priced a little over 60,000 rupees comes with a large and a distinctive fuel tank, headlamps that are 60% brighter, and the tried and tested DTSI engine. This is Bajaj's big bet to spruce up volumes in a segment which has long been dominated by Hero MotoCorp. Currently, the size of the commuter segment is about 500,000 units per month, and Bajaj accounts for just about 20,000 units in that segment on the back of its Discover brand. But with this latest offering, the company hopes to touch the 50,000 unit per month mark to complement its leadership position in the premium segment with the Pulsar and its significant presence in the entry-level market with the revived CT100 brand.
Our initial capacity is 20,000 units per month, which we should have in March. In terms of our targets, we've shared this earlier, we would like to sell around 50,000 of these bikes every month. The executive segment is currently dominated by Hero. So yes, that segment is currently where Hero sells a lot of motorcycles. Honda too sells some motorcycles. So we hope to be in that space and do very well there.
V also marks Bajaj's entry into the commuter segment with a new brand, the first one since Discover was launched way back in 2004. CNBC TV18 asked Rajiv Bajaj whether the move meant that the company would abandon its twin-modelled motorcycle strategy and whether the company will launch more brands in the future.
Yes, we keep going with our twin brand strategy, and this means that in the future there might be another opportunity to create yet another segment. If I were to lean on Eric's presentation to sense one more latent demand and to create one more answer for that, this is always possible. Hero, CBC or a hunk is a brand. It is just a product because it sells at a discount, it doesn't make money, it doesn't dominate, it has 4% market share.
Well, never the sorts to mince his words there, Rajiv Bajaj, saying that even if they go ahead and introduce more brands, he's saying that that is definitely very likely and it will still continue to differentiate itself from that of the strategy followed by Hero MotoCorp. But whether the V will recreate the magic of Pulsar, only time will tell. In New Delhi, Ronojoy Banerjee.
Well, that's new Bajaj V. Now, barely a month ago, Commerce Minister Nirmala Sitharaman, in an interview to CNBC TV18, said that the Trans-Pacific Partnership, or the TPP, will not adversely impact India's exports, or at least she didn't believe that it would hurt India's export at this point in time. But today, in a U-turn of sorts, the Commerce Minister says that the pact between those 12 nations in the Pacific Rim, including the United States, will adversely impact India's exports. In fact, here's what the Commerce Minister said today, and then what she told us on the 29th of December last year. Take a listen.
The TPP will certainly have an impact on India's exports. And it is most likely to affect sectors like leather goods, plastics and chemicals, textiles and clothing. I think the way in which investor and the state relationship are worked out on the TPP is also going to have an impact on India.
The TPP, if I were to take as an example of the plurilaterals that we're talking about, is yet to be even ratified in the United States. Their own Congress has not passed it. Many governments which are party to it have not even taken it to their parliaments, to their legislatures. So it's yet to be born. The TPP has a lot more on harmonizing standards than immediately benefiting each other from trade and tariff. So for me, it's an agreement where countries have agreed to harmonize their standards to the US prevailing standards.
Right. So that's the Commerce Minister on what she said on the 29th of December 2015 on TPP and how there seems to be a change of mind, a change of stance today when she spoke about how it's going to have an adverse impact on India. Now, this is turning out to be an all-out war in the FMCG space. Spiritual guru Baba Ramdev has hit out at rival FMCG companies for conspiring to defame Patanjali Ayurveda, which of late has come under the scanner. This after charges of adulteration were leveled against some of its products. Speaking at an event today, Baba Ramdev trained his guns on Unilever and Colgate, saying foreign companies are here to loot the Indian customers.
किस तरह से पूरा एक जाल बिछा करके या तो जो भी कोई कंपनी पनपती है उसको खरीद लेते हैं या उसको खत्म करते हैं। अब पतंजलि के साथ ये दोनों ही नहीं कर पा रहे। घर की खेती है लोगों की, कोई भी फेसबुक पे बैठ के, ट्विटर पे बैठ करके और व्हाट्सएप पे बैठ के कुछ भी रिपोर्ट कर देता है। अब इसमें आप किसी से भी करवा लो, और जो जिस आदमी, वो आदमी लखनऊ का जिसने फेसबुक के ऊपर या जो है व्हाट्सएप पर ये जो है पोस्ट किया, आदमी लखनऊ का, लैब जो है वो जयपुर की, और वो आदमी अभी ढूंढे से नहीं मिल रहा। उसके खिलाफ अब हम कानूनी कार्रवाई कर रहे हैं, सब चीजें करेंगे, उस लैब को भी हम कोशिश करेंगे बंद करवाएं।
Well, it's an all-out war brewing in the FMCG space there. Now, it could be a possible setback for telecom operators who've been pushing for differential pricing and for zero-rating platforms. The telecom regulator may set to reject differential pricing altogether. But CNBC TV18 learns from sources that this does not mean that you cannot avail free data at all. Kritika joins us now to explain why. Kritika.
Well, yes, the net neutrality debate will get some kind of closure within this week, as TRAI will be releasing their final order on differential pricing for data services. Now, while we have confirmed from sources that they are likely to reject differential pricing and bar free data or subsidized data usage for specific services including WhatsApp, Facebook, etc. While they are likely to bar these, our sources say that there is a catch here. There will be free data access allowed if it is not restricted to any specific services. So what does that mean? I'm a Vodafone customer. Vodafone can give me subsidized data, but if it is across the board and not restricted for any specific data, for example, if they're giving me a restricted package on free access to Facebook, that will be discontinued with immediate effect, which basically means that areas like zero rating, free basics will be discontinued. Now, our sources do say that the TRAI is looking at alternate ways of providing free internet, and they're also considering offering differential pricing for not-for-profit or for emergency services. However, the clarity on net neutrality will emerge in the coming days. This will be important, yes, but in the next few weeks, we understand that there will be more clarity that will emerge on nitty-gritties and fine print of net neutrality.
All right. Okay, thanks, Kritika, for joining us. With that, as the telecom regulator seems to be batting for net neutrality, we might see some new alternative methods as well. The telecom sector is desperate to connect with the finance minister before he begins finalizing budget 2016. But this time, the long list of demands boils down to two things: clearer policies and help in reducing debt. Kritika Saxena gets you that story.
IRB Budget 2016, now or never, on the CNBC network.
We've been so disappointed in the last several budgets that we are not asking for any big ticket items.
It's harsh, but it's the reality. That explains why this year's budget wish list from the telecom sector has more requests for clarity on various policies, particularly with regard to taxation. First, direct tax. First on the list is whether payments made for trading or sharing of spectrum are royalty. If not, the sector asks that the withholding tax applicable on these payments be removed.
The number of tax disputes, whether something is treated as royalty in capital gains, whether it is in terms of really saying that, in terms of spectrum trading.
Speaking of withholding tax, players are also asking that withholding tax provisions on distributors' margins on the sale of SIM cards and prepaid vouchers be removed, since these are in the nature of commission. The third demand is for more clarity on how spectrum fees are to be taxed.
There is an ambiguity in how would you tax the spectrum amount that is paid. Is it subject to depreciation or is it subject to amortization? If it is subject to amortization under 35AB, then you get 5-year period. Whereas if it's subject to depreciation, then, you know, you have weighted, you know, it's a WDV, 25%, and it goes on for a longer time.
While on the subject of fees, telecom players have once again submitted that they are being crippled by high license fees and hope the finance minister can help relieve some of this burden.
We are asking for reductions in terms of the license fee and the spectrum usage because, for example, the 5% USOF fee, which is part of the 8%, we do more for rural penetration rather than anything that the government does.
The sector's wish list is longer when it comes to relief from indirect taxes. The demands here include a removal of the Swachh Bharat cess, the introduction of a provision for maintenance of regular balance of unutilized credit to the extent of credit disputed, and a reduction of the rate of interest charged on delayed payment of service tax from the current 30%. And then there's the need to reduce excise and customs duties on hardware to help consumers keep up with changing technology.
You've got to have handsets which are, you know, make in India and which are, you know, reasonably cheaper, right? I mean, sub probably 3,000 or 3,500, 4,000 rupees. So what kind of incentives you can give that? Because that again sort of really will give a fillip to the economy.
The demands, of course, extend beyond taxation. The biggest in this area is the creation of a specialized committee to ensure the implementation of the broadband highway connecting gram panchayats and villages.
If the budget was to announce the creation of a new broadband implementation agency which actually combines public sector with public sector resources with private sector expertise, I think we could have a very significant shift.
This is a sea change from the wish list over the last 4 years, which have had high hopes from the budget, the most glaring change being the omission of the request for infrastructure status to the sector. But even if some of these demands are met, the sector says it can look forward to a slightly better 2016. In Mumbai, Kritika Saxena.
Well, that's the wish list from the telecom sector. But coming up, acid test in Iowa. The White House aspirants gear up for the first big test. A special report when we return.